I never thought I would lose my house over a garbage can. But there I was, staring at a foreclosure notice taped to my front door on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona. My name is Connor Thompson, and I had been living in the Saguaro Springs community for 3 years without any major issues. The neighborhood was nice enough, with its cookie-cutter Spanish-style houses painted in approved beige and tan colors, manicured lawns that required constant watering despite the desert climate, and streets lined with young palm trees that the HOA insisted added value to our properties. I worked as an electrical contractor, which meant irregular hours and sometimes coming home late at night after emergency calls. That is how this whole mess started. The notice fluttered in the hot Arizona wind, and I ripped it off my door with shaking hands. According to the document, I owed the Saguaro Springs Homeowners Association $1,200 in fines, late fees, and legal costs. The original violation, leaving my garbage can visible from the street past noon on collection day. The fine had been $100. $100 that had somehow snowballed into a foreclosure action against my $250,000 home. I stood there in my driveway, sweat already forming on my forehead, even though it was only 8 in the morning. The foreclosure notice was dated, giving me 30 days to pay the full amount or face losing my home. My mind raced. I had never received the original violation notice. I checked my mail religiously, paid all my bills on time, and kept my credit score above 750. This had to be some kind of mistake. My neighbor, an elderly man named Robert Chen, walked over from his yard where he had been pretending to inspect his oleander bushes. We both knew he had been watching. "They got you too?" Robert asked, his face grim. "What do you mean too?" "Patricia Summers, the HOA president. She has been on a rampage for the past 6 months, started with sending violation notices for everything. My wife got fined $200 because our house number plaque was the wrong shade of bronze. Bronze. Who knew there were different shades?" I looked at the foreclosure notice again. "But this says I owe over $1,000 for a garbage can. They add fees for everything. Processing fees, administrative fees, legal review fees, late payment fees that compound daily. It is predatory, Connor. And if you try to fight it, they add the cost of their attorney to your bill." Robert glanced around nervously, as if Patricia might be lurking behind one of the identical palm trees. "There is a meeting tonight at the community center." "Not an official HOA meeting, just some neighbors who are dealing with the same thing. You should come. 7 o'clock. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work but failing miserably. I had a job rewiring an office building in Scottsdale, but my mind kept drifting back to that foreclosure notice. Between pulling cables through ceiling spaces, I called a real estate attorney whose number I found online. Her consultation fee was $300 just to review my documents, and she could not see me for 2 weeks. I made the appointment anyway, but 2 weeks felt like an eternity when I had a foreclosure hanging over my head. That evening, I arrived at the Saguaro Springs Community Center at 6:45. The building was a squat, stucco structure with the same Spanish tile roof as every other building in the neighborhood. Inside, the multipurpose room already had about 15 people gathered, sitting in a circle of folding chairs. I recognized most of them from around the neighborhood, though I had never been particularly social. Working 60-hour weeks did not leave much time for block parties. Robert waved me over to an empty chair next to him. Across the circle sat a woman about my age, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes. She wore scrubs with cartoon characters on them, probably a nurse or medical assistant. "Everyone, this is Connor Thompson from Saguaro Court," Robert announced. He got a foreclosure notice today. The murmurs around the circle were sympathetic but not surprised. The woman in scrubs caught my eye. "I'm Hannah Ortiz," she said. "I got mine 3 weeks ago. They are trying to take my house over a lawn violation. Apparently, my grass was a 1/4 inch too long during one of their inspections." A 1/4 inch! I could not hide my disbelief. They measured it, took photographs with a ruler in the frame and everything. Hannah's voice carried a bitter edge. "The original fine was $75. I paid it immediately because I work 2 jobs and do not have time to argue. But then they said I paid it late, even though I paid within the 15-day window stated in the violation notice. They added late fees, then administrative fees for having to send me a second notice about the late fees, then legal review fees when I questioned the charges." An older woman next to Hannah spoke up. "I am Margaret Wells. They fined me because my mailbox had a small rust spot. $150 fine. I am on a fixed income, Social Security. I asked if I could pay in installments, and they said no, full payment within 15 days or face additional penalties. When I could not pay it all at once, they added $500 in legal fees because their attorney had to review my account." Around the circle, everyone had similar stories. A man named David got fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway because commercial vehicles were not allowed, even though he owned a landscaping business, and the truck was necessary for his livelihood. A young couple, neither of whom looked older than 25, had been fined for having the wrong color curtains visible from the street. An approved beige was required, but theirs were apparently cream, a distinction that required the HOA to hire a color consultant at the homeowner's expense. "This is insane," I said. "How is any of this legal?" Robert pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Because we all signed the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions when we bought our homes. The CC and Articus give the board almost unlimited power to enforce neighborhood standards and levy fines. Most people never read them. They are over 100 pages of legal language, but buried in there are provisions that let them foreclose on properties for unpaid fines and assessments." "But there have to be limits," I protested. "They cannot just steal people's homes over garbage cans and rust spots." "They can if nobody stops them," Hannah said. She leaned forward, her expression intense. "I have been doing research. HOA foreclosures are legal in Arizona. They are called non-judicial foreclosures, which means they do not have to go through the court system first. They just have to follow certain procedures, send certain notices, and then they can auction off your house to satisfy the debt. So what do we do?" The young woman with the wrong color curtains asked, her voice shaking. Robert cleared his throat. "We have been pooling our resources. Margaret's grandson is in law school and he has been helping us research. We think our best option is to petition the court to intervene. If we can show a pattern of abuse and violations of Arizona HOA law, a judge might step in." "What kind of violations?" I asked. "For starters, they are not following their own bylaws," Robert said, flipping through his papers. "According to the CC and Articus, the HOA board is supposed to have 5 members. Right now, it only has 3. Patricia Summers as president, her sister Brenda Klein as treasurer, and their friend Linda Morrison as secretary. They have not held elections in over 2 years, even though the bylaws require annual elections." Hannah jumped in. "They are also not providing proper notice for violations. Arizona law requires HOA violation notices to be sent by certified mail. Most of us never received any notices at all, or if we did, they came by regular mail with no proof of delivery. Then they claim we ignored the violations and add penalties for non-compliance. And the fees they are charging are not authorized in the CC and Articus, Margaret added. I had my grandson review the entire document. There is no provision for many of these administrative and legal fees they are tacking on. They are making them up as they go along. David, the landscaper, spoke up for the first time. His voice was rough with emotion. My wife and I saved for 10 years to buy our house. We have 2 kids, both in elementary school. If we lose our home, I do not know what we will do. We cannot afford rent in this market, not with rental prices the way they are. We would end up in our truck or in a shelter. The room fell silent. The weight of what we were all facing pressed down on us. These were not just houses, they were homes, lives, futures. So we fight, I said, surprised by the determination in my own voice. What do we need to do? Over the next 2 hours we organized. Robert had been documenting everything, and we made copies of everyone's violation notices, foreclosure notices, and payment records. Hannah volunteered to compile everything into a chronological timeline. Margaret's grandson, a second-year law student named Timothy, had found an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and had agreed to meet with us at a reduced rate. As the meeting broke up, Hannah approached me in the parking lot. The Arizona sky had turned that particular shade of purple it gets in the summer evenings, and the heat was finally starting to break. You live on Saguaro Court, right? I am on Saguaro Way, just around the corner, she said. Do you want to grab coffee tomorrow and compare notes? I have been keeping detailed records of everything since this started. I agreed, and we exchanged phone numbers. As I drove home, I felt something shift inside me. I had spent most of my adult life keeping my head down, doing my work, paying my bills, and avoiding conflict. But there was something about Patricia Summers and her petty tyranny that ignited a rage I did not know I had. She had picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. The next morning, I met Hannah at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, far away from Saguaro Springs. She arrived with 2 bulging file folders and a laptop covered in medical-related stickers. I might be a little obsessive, Hannah admitted as she spread documents across our corner table. But when they came after my house, I decided to treat it like a diagnosis. Collect all the data, look for patterns, find the underlying cause. Her records were impressive. She had not only documented her own case, but had been quietly collecting information about other violations in the neighborhood for months. She had photographs, copies of notices she had found stuffed in people's mailboxes, and even a spreadsheet tracking when and where the HOA conducted inspections. Look at this, she said, pulling up her spreadsheet. Patricia does not inspect randomly. She targets specific streets in a pattern. First, she hits the houses closest to the neighborhood entrance, the ones visitors see first. Then she works her way through the community, hitting every street once before starting over. But here is the interesting part. She inspects certain houses way more frequently than others. I leaned over to look at the highlighted addresses. What did these colors mean? Yellow are houses owned by people who have spoken out against the board at meetings or questioned their decisions. Red are houses where the homeowners are behind on dues, even by just 1 month. Green are houses owned by people the board considers undesirable for whatever reason. How do you know they consider them undesirable? Hannah pulled out a printed email. Because Linda Morrison, the secretary, is an idiot who does not understand reply all. 6 months ago, there was a community email thread about setting up a neighborhood watch program. Linda accidentally replied all to a message from Patricia complaining about the demographics of certain homeowners. Direct quote, "We need to clean up the neighborhood and encourage a better class of resident." I read the email, my jaw tightening. The implications were clear and potentially illegal. Patricia was not just power-hungry. She was using the HOA as a weapon to push out homeowners she deemed undesirable. Hannah, this is discrimination. If we can prove she is targeting people based on protected class characteristics. It gets worse, Hannah interrupted. She pulled out another document. I did a public records request with the county. Over the past year, Patricia's company has purchased 3 homes in Saguaro Springs at foreclosure auctions. All 3 were HOA foreclosures that she initiated. She bought them for pennies on the dollar, then flipped them for huge profits. The coffee I had been drinking suddenly tasted bitter. She is manufacturing foreclosures to make money. That is what it looks like. And if she is doing it with the HOA's legal authority, she can force the sales and swoop in as a buyer. It is completely unethical and probably illegal, but without someone challenging her, she just keeps doing it. I sat back in my chair, processing everything. This was not just about power or enforcing rules. It was a scheme. Patricia Summers was using her position as HOA president to systematically target homeowners, pile on fines and fees until they could not pay, then foreclose and buy their properties at auction. It was predatory, calculated, and had probably already destroyed multiple families. We need that attorney meeting, I said. When is it? Tomorrow afternoon. His name is Martin Gregory. He has a practice in temp and specializes in HOA law. I sent him a summary of our cases, and he said he thinks we have grounds for a lawsuit, but he wants to meet with us before committing. The next day, 5 of us piled into my truck and drove to Martin Gregory's office. Me, Hannah, Robert, Margaret, and David. The attorney's office was in a modest building near Arizona State University, and Martin himself was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many of these cases. I appreciate you all coming, Martin said after we settled into his conference room. I have reviewed the materials you sent, and I want to be straight with you. What you are describing is abuse of power, and some of it may cross the line into fraud and discrimination. But HOA cases are complicated. Even when the board is clearly in the wrong, they have significant legal protections. What kind of protections? Robert asked. The business judgment rule, for one. Courts generally defer to HOA boards on decision-making, assuming they are acting in good faith to serve the community. To overcome that presumption, you need to prove they are acting in bad faith or violating the law. Martin pulled up a document on his laptop and turned the screen so we could see. But in your case, I think we can make that showing. The targeting pattern Hannah documented, the financial conflicts of interest, the failure to follow proper procedures, the excessive fees not authorized in the CC and Artiques, all of that builds a case for bad faith and abuse of power. So you will take our case? Hannah asked. I will, but I need you to understand what you are up against. Patricia Summers and the board will fight hard. They have been using the same attorney, Gerald Hoffman, for years. He knows every trick in the book for HOA defense. They will try to bury you in legal fees, drag out the process, and intimidate you into dropping the suit. We do not have a choice, David said quietly. They are taking our homes. Martin nodded. Then here is what we are going to do. We are going to file a lawsuit against the HOA board in Maricopa County Superior Court. We will name Patricia Summers, Brenda Klein, and Linda Morrison as defendants in their capacity as board members. We are going to allege breach of fiduciary duty, violations of Arizona's HOA laws, fraud, and abuse of power. And we are going to ask the court for emergency relief, a temporary restraining order to halt all foreclosure proceedings until the case is resolved. How much is this going to cost?" Margaret asked, her voice worried. "My normal retainer would be $10,000 for a case like this, but I am willing to work with you. If you can pool together $5,000 as a starting retainer, I will take the case, and we can work out a payment plan for the rest. If we win, we can potentially recover attorney fees from the HOA." We looked at each other. $5,000 split among even a dozen homeowners was manageable. By the end of the meeting, we had committed to the retainer, and Martin had started drafting our complaint. Over the next week, word spread through Saguaro Springs. What had started as 15 people at a community center meeting grew to 30 homeowners ready to join the lawsuit. Each had similar stories of harassment, excessive fines, and foreclosure threats. Hannah created a shared online folder where everyone could upload their documentation. The evidence kept mounting. Patricia Summers must have gotten wind of what we were doing because the retaliation started immediately. Suddenly, every plaintiff in the lawsuit received multiple new violation notices. My mailbox was allegedly the wrong shade of black. Hannah's house number was supposedly not visible enough from the street, even though it had not changed in the 3 years she lived there. Robert got cited for having an unauthorized decorative rock in his front yard, a rock that had been there for 5 years. "They are panicking," Martin told us during a conference call. "This is actually good for our case. Keep documenting everything. Take photos with timestamps. Save every piece of paper they send you." 10 days after our meeting with Martin, he filed our lawsuit. The complaint was 47 pages long, detailing every abuse, every improper fee, every procedural violation. We also filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order to stop all foreclosure proceedings. The hearing for the TRO was scheduled for the following week in front of Judge Rachel Morrison, no relation to Linda Morrison from the HOA board. We were told Judge Morrison had a reputation for being no-nonsense and having little patience for procedural games. The morning of the hearing, I put on the only suit I owned, a navy blue one I had bought for my father's funeral 3 years earlier. Hannah met me in the courthouse parking garage, also dressed in professional clothes that looked slightly uncomfortable on her. "I am nervous," she admitted as we walked toward the courthouse entrance. "Me too. I have never sued anyone before. We are doing the right thing though, right?" "We are not just being difficult." I stopped and turned to face her. "Hannah, they are trying to take your home over a 1/4 inch of grass. We are absolutely doing the right thing." Inside the courtroom, Martin was already setting up at the plaintiff's table. On the other side of the room, I saw Patricia Summers for the first time in person. She was exactly what I had imagined. A woman in her mid-50s with aggressively blonde hair, too much makeup, and an expression of permanent disapproval. She sat ramrod straight in her chair, flanked by her sister Brenda and their attorney, Gerald Hoffman. Hoffman was a portly man in an expensive suit, and he kept whispering to Patricia while shooting glances at our table. More of our group filed in and filled the gallery behind us. Robert and Margaret sat directly behind me. I could feel the tension in the room. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and Judge Morrison entered. She was a petite African-American woman, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that swept across the courtroom. "Be seated," Judge Morrison said, settling into her chair and pulling the case file in front of her. "We are here on the plaintiff's emergency motion for a temporary restraining order in the matter of Thompson versus Saguaro Springs Homeowners Association. I have reviewed the motion, the complaint, and the opposition. Counsel, let us start with the plaintiffs. Mr. Gregory, tell me why I should grant this TRO." Martin stood, and I was struck by how calm and confident he seemed. "Your Honor, The plaintiffs are 32 homeowners in the Saguaro Springs community who are facing imminent foreclosure over minor violations and excessive fines that violate both the HOA's own governing documents and Arizona law. Without this court's intervention, several of these families will lose their homes within the next 2 weeks. He pulled up a presentation on the courtroom's display screen. The pattern here is clear and disturbing. The HOA board, led by defendant Patricia Summers, has been systematically targeting homeowners with violation notices for trivial matters. When homeowners cannot pay the fines or contest them, the board adds excessive and unauthorized fees until the debt becomes insurmountable. Then they initiate foreclosure proceedings. Martin clicked to show several examples, including my garbage can violation and Hannah's grass citation. But here is what makes this particularly egregious, Your Honor. Miss Summers owns a property investment company. Over the past 14 months, she has purchased 3 homes at HOA foreclosure auctions, foreclosures that she herself initiated as HOA president. She bought these properties for 10 to 15% of their market value, then resold them at full price within months. She has profited over $400,000 from this scheme. Judge Morrison's expression darkened. Do you have documentation of these transactions? Yes, Your Honor. County property records, foreclosure notices, and resale data. It is all in our exhibit binder. The judge turned to Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman, I assume you want to respond to this. Hoffman stood, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, the plaintiffs are mischaracterizing routine HOA enforcement as some kind of conspiracy. The Saguaro Springs HOA has every right to enforce its covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Every homeowner agreed to these rules when they purchased their property. If they violate the rules and do not pay the fines, there are consequences. That is not abuse of power. That is basic contract enforcement. What about the allegation that Miss Summers is buying the foreclosed properties? Judge Morrison asked. Miss Summers' business activities are completely separate from her volunteer role as HOA president. She has not violated any laws by purchasing properties at public auction. Anyone can bid at those auctions. But she is the one initiating the foreclosures in the first place, Martin interjected. She is creating the financial distress, forcing the foreclosure, then buying the property as a private citizen. It is a textbook conflict of interest. Judge Morrison held up her hand. Mr. Gregory, you will have a chance to respond. Mr. Hoffman, what about the allegations that the board is not following proper procedures? The plaintiffs claim they never received proper notice of violations, and that the fees being charged are not authorized in the CC and Articus. Hoffman waved his hand dismissively. Your Honor, the plaintiffs received notice. If they claim they did not, that is their problem. Perhaps they should check their mail more carefully. As for the fees, they are standard administrative costs associated with enforcement. Every HOA charges similar fees. Are they enumerated in the CC and Articus? The judge pressed. The CC and Articus give the board authority to set reasonable fees and assessments. That is not what I asked, counsel. Are these specific fees listed in the governing documents? Yes or no? Hoffman hesitated. The board has discretion to determine what fees are necessary to administer the HOA. I will take that as a no. Judge Morrison made a note on her legal pad. What about the allegation that the board has not held elections in over 2 years, despite the bylaws requiring annual elections? The current board has remained in place to provide continuity and stability. Mr. Hoffman, I am losing patience. Did the board hold elections as required by their bylaws? No, Your Honor, but there is nothing in Arizona law that specifically requires HOA elections to be held on schedule. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, and I could see her jaw tighten. "Mr. Gregory, do you have anything else to add?" Martin stood again. "Just this, Your Honor. The essence of our emergency motion is that these homeowners face irreparable harm. If the foreclosures proceed, they lose their homes. Money cannot fix that. Meanwhile, the HOA suffers no harm from a temporary pause in foreclosure proceedings while this case moves forward. The balance of equities strongly favors granting the TRO." The judge looked down at the documents in front of her for a long moment. The courtroom was completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. "Here is what I am going to do," Judge Morrison finally said. "I am granting the temporary restraining order. All foreclosure proceedings are stayed pending further order of this court. Furthermore, I am ordering that no new fines or fees can be assessed against any of the plaintiffs while this TRO is in effect." Relief washed through me so intensely I thought I might pass out. Next to me, Hannah grabbed my hand and squeezed, but Judge Morrison was not done. "I am also going to set an expedited schedule for this case because the allegations in this complaint, if true, are deeply troubling. We are going to have a preliminary injunction hearing in 3 weeks. Between now and then, I am ordering full discovery on an expedited basis. Mr. Hoffman, your clients are going to produce every document related to these foreclosures, every financial record showing how fees are calculated, all meeting minutes for the past 3 years, and any communications between Miss Summers and the other board members regarding enforcement decisions." Patricia Summers made a noise of protest, but Hoffman put a hand on her arm. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am appointing a special master to oversee the HOA's operations pending resolution of this case. The special master will be copied on all board decisions and will have veto authority over any enforcement actions. My clerk will provide you with the special master's contact information." "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," Hoffman protested. "You are essentially taking over the management of a private HOA. What is irregular, Mr. Hoffman, is an HOA president buying homes that she herself forced into foreclosure. What is irregular is a board that has not held elections in over 2 years. What is irregular is 32 families facing homelessness over garbage cans and grass length. I am exercising my authority to prevent irreparable harm while this case proceeds. If you do not like it, you can file an appeal." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "We are adjourned. I will see you all back here in 3 weeks." As the judge left the courtroom, our entire group erupted in relieved chatter. People were hugging, crying, laughing. Margaret was openly weeping while Robert patted her shoulder. David had his phone out, already calling his wife with the news. Across the aisle, Patricia Summers stood rigid, her face red with fury. She was hissing something at Hoffman, who looked uncomfortable. As they gathered their papers and headed for the exit, Patricia shot a look of pure hatred toward our group. "She looks upset," Hannah said quietly. "Good," I replied. Outside the courthouse, Martin gathered us together. "This is a great first step, but do not get complacent. We still have a long fight ahead. The preliminary injunction hearing is in 3 weeks, and that is when things are going to get really intense. They are going to come at us with everything they have got." "What should we expect?" Robert asked. "They are going to try to discredit our claims, argue that each violation was legitimate, and paint you all as troublemakers who just do not want to follow the rules. We need to be prepared to counter that. I need you all to document everything from this point forward. Every interaction with the HOA, every notice you receive, every conversation. Keep a log." Over the next 3 weeks, discovery turned into a gold mine. The special master, a retired judge named Harold Brennan, took his role seriously. He ordered the HOA to turn over everything, and what we found was even worse than we had imagined. The HOA's financial records were a mess. Patricia had been paying herself a salary of $75,000 per year as HOA president, even though the bylaws specified that board positions were volunteer roles. Brenda, the treasurer, had been paying herself $50,000. Together, the two sisters had pulled over $250,000 out of the HOA's accounts over 2 years. The meeting minutes revealed that most board decisions were made without proper votes or even meetings. Patricia simply decided what she wanted to do, typed up fake meeting minutes, and filed them. Many of the violation inspections were not conducted on the dates claimed in the notices. In some cases, Patricia had driven around the neighborhood after dark with her phone camera, taking pictures of whatever she could find wrong. The communications between Patricia and her sister were particularly damning. We found emails discussing which homeowners to target based on whether they had spoken out against the board. There were text messages about manipulating the foreclosure timeline to ensure Patricia's company could submit winning bids before other investors knew about the auctions. Most damning of all, we found evidence that Patricia had been intercepting violation notices before they could be properly delivered. She would generate the notices in the HOA management system, mark them as sent, but then never actually mail them. That way, when the homeowner inevitably did not respond to a notice they never received, she could assess late fees and escalate the violation. "This is criminal," Hannah said when Martin showed us the evidence during a prep session for the preliminary injunction hearing. "She has been committing fraud. Fraud, embezzlement, possibly mail fraud if we can prove she was using the postal system to perpetrate the scheme," Martin agreed. "I have already contacted the Arizona Attorney General's office. They are opening an investigation." The preliminary injunction hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late July. Phoenix was hitting 115 degrees by noon, and the inside of the courthouse felt almost cold by comparison. This time, the gallery was packed. Our group had grown to over 50 homeowners who wanted to show support. The local news had picked up the story, and I spotted at least 2 reporters with notebooks in the back row. Judge Morrison took the bench, and I could tell immediately that she was not in a good mood. She had clearly read through the discovery materials. "Before we begin," the judge said, "I want to note for the record that I have reviewed the materials produced during discovery, and I am frankly appalled. What I am seeing suggests systematic abuse, financial impropriety, and possible criminal conduct. But we are here today to determine whether a preliminary injunction should issue, so let us stay focused on that question." She turned to Martin. "Mr. Gregory, I have read your briefs and I am inclined to grant the preliminary injunction. Is there anything you want to add?" "Only this, Your Honor. The evidence shows this is not a case of aggressive but good faith HOA enforcement. This is a scheme to defraud homeowners and enrich the board members personally. The harm to the plaintiffs if foreclosures are allowed to proceed is catastrophic and irreversible. We respectfully request that the court grant a preliminary injunction maintaining the status quo pending a full trial on the merits." Judge Morrison nodded, then turned to Hoffman. "Mr. Hoffman, do you have anything new to add that is not in your opposition brief?" Hoffman stood, and he looked less confident than before. "Your Honor, while some of the financial practices may not have been ideal, there is no evidence of intentional wrongdoing. Miss Summers and the other board members were volunteers trying to maintain property values in a large community. Mistakes may have been made, but that does not justify the court taking over the HOA's operations. Mr. Hoffman, your client paid herself $75,000 per year. That is not volunteering. That is embezzlement from the homeowners association funds. The board voted to authorize compensation for the officers given the time commitment required. "Show me the meeting minutes documenting that vote," Judge Morrison said sharply. Hoffman fumbled with his papers. "I believe that was discussed in executive session, so there is no record of it." "Convenient." The judge made another note. "What about the allegations that Miss Summers was intercepting violation notices?" "Your Honor, the notices were generated and recorded in the system. If homeowners did not receive them, that is a postal service issue, not my client's fault." "Mr. Hoffman, we have testimony from 3 different homeowners stating that they never received notices, followed by documents showing that certified mail receipts supposedly proving delivery were signed in handwriting that matches Miss Summers' signature on other documents." "Are you seriously suggesting the Postal Service forged these receipts?" The courtroom stirred. This was new information that had come out in the last week of discovery. Patricia's handwriting was distinctive, with elaborate loops on her capital letters. When a forensic document examiner compared the signatures on the certified mail receipts to Patricia's known signatures, they matched. Hoffman sat down slowly. "Your Honor, I would need to consult with my client about those allegations." "I am sure you would." Judge Morrison flipped through her notes. "Here is my ruling. I am granting a preliminary injunction. All foreclosure proceedings against the plaintiffs are stayed pending final resolution of this case or further order of this court. The special master will remain in place to oversee HOA operations." Patricia made that noise again, louder this time. Judge Morrison's eyes snapped to her. "Miss Summers, do you have something to say to this court?" Patricia stood up, ignoring Hoffman's attempts to pull her back down. "This is ridiculous. I have been trying to maintain standards in our community, and these people just want to do whatever they want. They do not want to follow rules. They want their houses to look trashy and bring down everyone's property values. Miss Summers, I would advise you to sit down and be quiet." "No. I will not sit down. I have worked for 3 years to make Saguaro Springs a premium community, and you are going to let these people destroy it because they are too lazy to bring in their garbage cans or mow their lawns properly." Judge Morrison's expression went icy. "Miss Summers, you are in contempt. Bailiff, please escort Miss Summers out of my courtroom." As the bailiff approached, Patricia's face turned purple. "You cannot do this. I know my rights. This is America. I am going to sue you, and I am going to sue all of them, and I am going to make sure every single one of them loses their homes." "Add another count of contempt," Judge Morrison said calmly. "Miss Summers, you are going to spend the night in jail to think about the proper respect due to this court. We will have a contempt hearing tomorrow morning." As the bailiff took Patricia by the arm and led her out, still yelling threats and accusations, Brenda and Linda sat frozen at the defense table. Hoffman looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Morrison waited until Patricia's voice faded down the hallway before continuing. "Now, where was I? Yes, the preliminary injunction is granted, but I am going to go further. Based on what I have seen in the discovery materials and based on Miss Summers' conduct in this courtroom today, I am removing the current board of directors from power effective immediately." A gasp went through the courtroom. Even Martin looked surprised. "Your Honor," Hoffman said weakly, "you do not have authority to dissolve an HOA board." "Watch me, counsel." Under Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 33-16-2, the court has authority to appoint a receiver for a homeowners association if the association's property is in danger of being lost, removed, or materially injured, or if the association's affairs are conducted in a manner that threatens irreparable injury to the homeowners. That is exactly what we have here. Judge Morrison pulled out a prepared order. I am appointing Judge Brennan, who has been serving as special master, as the permanent receiver for the Saguaro Springs HOA. He will have full authority to manage the association's affairs, hire appropriate management, and organize new elections. The current board members are removed from their positions immediately and are barred from serving on the board in the future. She signed the order with a flourish. Judge Brennan, are you present? From the back of the courtroom, a tall man with white hair stood up. Yes, Your Honor. You are going to need to hire a management company and a forensic accountant. I want a full audit of the HOA's finances going back 3 years. You are also going to need to organize fair elections within 90 days. Can you do that? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Bill your time to the HOA at your normal hourly rate. If the HOA does not have sufficient funds because of the prior board's mismanagement, we will figure something out. Judge Morrison looked out at our group. As for the homeowners who have been subjected to this abuse, I am nullifying all fines and fees assessed over the past 2 years. You do not owe the HOA anything except your regular monthly or annual dues. If you have already paid fines, the receiver will work with you on getting refunds. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was over. We had won, but Judge Morrison was still talking. I am also referring this matter to the Arizona Attorney General's office and the Maricopa County Attorney for criminal investigation. What I have seen suggests multiple violations of Arizona law, including fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. That is beyond the scope of this civil case, but the criminal justice system needs to be involved. She banged her gavel. We are adjourned. Mr. Hoffman, make sure your client appears for the contempt hearing tomorrow morning. If she fails to appear, I will issue a bench warrant. As we filed out of the courtroom, the energy was electric. People were crying, hugging, thanking Martin and each other. The reporters converged on us, asking for comments. Martin handled most of the media questions while I just stood there, overwhelmed. Hannah found me on the courthouse steps. We did it, she said, her eyes bright. We actually did it. We did, I agreed. I still cannot believe it. Do you want to get that coffee again to celebrate? I smiled. I would like that. Over the next few months, the fallout from the case continued to ripple through Saguaro Springs and beyond. The Arizona Attorney General's office filed criminal charges against Patricia Summers, Brenda Klein, and Linda Morrison. Patricia was charged with 15 counts of fraud, 3 counts of embezzlement, and multiple counts of forgery related to the certified mail receipts. Brenda and Linda faced lesser charges, but were also in serious legal trouble. Patricia tried to flee to Mexico before her trial, but was caught at the border. That added a flight risk designation, and the judge set her bail at $500,000, which she could not make. She sat in jail for 6 months before her trial began. The trial was everything we hoped it would be. The prosecution presented the evidence we had uncovered, along with additional financial records showing just how much money Patricia and her sister had stolen from the HOA. They had not just been paying themselves unauthorized salaries. They had been submitting fake invoices for services never performed, charging personal expenses to the HOA credit card, and even taking out loans against the HOA's assets to fund their personal businesses. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Brenda got 5 years. Linda, who cooperated with prosecutors and testified against the other 2, received probation and community service. Judge Brennan, serving as receiver, did an excellent job getting the HOA back on track. He hired a professional management company that actually understood HOA law and treated homeowners with respect. The forensic audit revealed that Patricia and Brenda had stolen over $450,000 from the association over 3 years. The receiver filed suit to recover those funds, and eventually, Patricia's and Brenda's personal assets were seized and sold to partially repay the HOA. The new board elections were held in October, 3 months after our court victory. Robert Chen ran for president and won easily. Hannah joined the board as a member at large. I stayed off the board. I had no interest in HOA politics, but I attended every meeting for the first year just to make sure things stayed on track. The new board's first action was to amend the CC and Articles to add proper checks and balances. No board member could serve more than 2 consecutive terms. All financial decisions over $1,000 required approval from at least 3 board members. A committee of volunteer homeowners would conduct audits quarterly. And most importantly, all violation notices had to be reviewed by an independent architectural committee before any fines could be assessed. The second thing the new board did was reduce and simplify the rules. It turned out that about 60% of the CC and Articles were unnecessary and overly restrictive. Nobody cared if your garbage can was visible from the street past noon as long as it was put away by evening. Nobody cared if your grass was a 1/4 inch too long or if your curtains were cream instead of beige. We kept the important rules about maintaining properties and not creating nuisances, but we got rid of the petty nonsense that Patricia had used as weapons. The house values in Saguaro Springs actually went up after the changes. Turns out people are willing to pay more to live in a community with a reasonable HOA rather than a tyrannical one. Who knew? As for me, life went back to normal, or at least a new version of normal. I kept working as an electrical contractor, though I was more selective about taking evening emergency calls. I started attending neighborhood barbecues and got to know my neighbors beyond just waving as we pulled in and out of our driveways. Hannah and I started dating about 6 months after the trial ended. It was not something either of us planned. It just happened naturally over coffee meetings and working together on HOA reform. She made me laugh. She understood what we had been through together, and she did not take herself too seriously, despite being one of the smartest people I had ever met. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard in Tucson. Robert officiated, using his authority as HOA president to jokingly pronounce us husband and wife. Margaret caught the bouquet. David and his family were there, no longer worried about losing their home and getting back on solid financial footing. The Saguaro Springs case ended up becoming a landmark in Arizona HOA law. The state legislature passed new regulations requiring oversight of HOA boards, limiting the fees that could be assessed, and making it much harder to foreclose on homes over unpaid fines. Other states started looking at Arizona's reforms as a model. Martin Gregory became something of a celebrity in the HOA law world, and he used his platform to help other homeowners facing similar situations. As for Patricia Summers, she remained in prison. I did not think about her much anymore. She had tried to destroy my life and the lives of dozens of other families over her petty desire for power and profit. Instead, she lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, her money, and ended up with a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. Sometimes I drove past the community center where we had held that first meeting, 15 scared homeowners trying to figure out how to fight back against someone who seemed untouchable. I remembered the fear and the anger and the determination that had carried us through months of legal battles. I thought about how close I had come to losing my home over a garbage can. The foreclosure notice that had been taped to my door was framed in my garage, a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong when power goes unchecked, and how important it is to stand up and fight back even when the odds seem impossible. On a Sunday evening in the spring, 3 years after that first violation notice, Hannah and I sat on our back patio watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. Our garbage can sat in plain view at the side of the house, right where it always was. No approved beige paint colors, no measuring grass height with rulers, no fear of coming home to find another threatening notice on the door. Just a neighborhood where people could live their lives in peace, which was all any of us had ever wanted. Hannah leaned against my shoulder. Do you ever think about how differently things could have gone if even one or two people had decided not to fight? I thought about it. All the time. If Robert had not organized that first meeting, or if Martin had not taken our case, or if Judge Morrison had not seen through Patricia's act. We got lucky in a lot of ways. It was not just luck. We worked for it. We stood up when it would have been easier to just walk away. Some people could not walk away, I pointed out. Margaret was on Social Security. David had 2 kids and no savings for first and last month's rent somewhere else. They had to fight. And you did not have to, Hannah said. You could have paid the $1,200 and moved on with your life, but you stayed and fought anyway. I pulled her closer. I guess I am just stubborn. She laughed. Thank God for that. In the distance, I could hear kids playing in someone's yard and the sound of a basketball bouncing on pavement, normal sounds of a normal neighborhood. Robert walked by on his evening constitutional and waved. Margaret was tending her roses, which were thriving now that she was not worried about whether they were the approved variety. The HOA still existed. It had to under Arizona law, but it was now what it was supposed to be. A tool to maintain common areas and handle shared resources, not a weapon to terrorize homeowners. The monthly meetings were boring discussions of landscaping budgets and pool maintenance schedules, exactly as they should be. I thought about Patricia sometimes, sitting in her prison cell, probably still convinced that she had been right and everyone else had been wrong. That she had been the victim of ungrateful homeowners who just did not understand what she was trying to do. Narcissists rarely achieved self-awareness, even when their actions landed them in prison. But mostly, I did not think about her at all. She had taken up enough space in my life, in all of our lives. She did not deserve any more. Instead, I focused on the good things that had come from our fight. The friendships forged in shared struggle, the satisfaction of standing up to a bully and winning. The knowledge that when systems of power are abused, ordinary people can still make a difference if they are willing to work together. And I focused on the simple pleasure of sitting on my own patio, in my own home that nobody could take away over a garbage can, watching the sunset with the woman I loved. It had been a long fight, but we had won. Not just the legal battle, but the larger war for the right to live in peace in our own homes without fear of petty tyrants with little power going to their heads in big ways. The garbage can incident, as it came to be known in our family stories, was now just history. A story we would tell someday to children and grandchildren about the time we had to sue the HOA to keep our house. They would probably think we were exaggerating. Nobody could really try to take your home over a garbage can, could they? But they could, and they did, and we stopped them. That was worth remembering. Not as a source of anger or resentment, but as a reminder that the system could work when people were willing to use it. That judges like Rachel Morrison still existed, who cared more about justice than legal technicalities. That lawyers like Martin Gregory would take on cases not just for money, but because they were the right thing to do. That communities could come together when threatened and find strength in numbers. As the last light faded from the sky and the desert cooled around us, I thought about all the people in other neighborhoods, other states, who might be facing their own Patricia Summers right now. Getting violation notices for trivial issues, watching fines compound into thousands of dollars, facing foreclosure over nonsense. Our story was out there now, in court records and news articles and legal precedents. Maybe it would help someone else find the courage to fight back. Maybe some lawyer in Ohio or Florida or Texas would cite Thompson v. Saguaro Springs HOA when defending a homeowner against an abusive board. Maybe some legislature would pass better protections because they read about what happened in our case. That possibility made everything we went through worthwhile. We had not just saved our own homes, we had potentially helped countless others we would never meet. Hannah stood up and stretched. "Come on, I will make dinner. You are in charge of taking out the garbage tonight." I laughed and followed her inside, making a mental note to leave the garbage can out past noon tomorrow, just because I could. After everything we had been through, that small act of rebellion felt sweet.